it will be much more impactful when the big countries all start to FOMO into it. And it just, it's, in my view, it's going to become obvious to everybody in the next, I'd say 10 years, maybe 15 years. It's going to become obvious to everybody that this is the best form of money we've ever had. And the switch over into this is going to be really, really substantial. And that's how you get to $1, $2, $3, $4 million a coin. And at that point in time, all the other stuff will just, it'll quickly fade away. So that's where we're going, but it's going to take some time. It's at least 5 years and maybe 10, 15.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today I'm here with Larry, which is professor, author, and CrossFit athlete. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Marcy. Nice to see you and nice to be on your show. I'm not quite yet an author. The book is a couple weeks away, but I'm working diligently to get the layout right. It's harder than I thought, but it will be out soon.
I will link, guys, in the description. You can pre-order it now on Kindle, right? And it will be released on Valentine's Day.
That's worst case. I'd like to have it be earlier February, and it might be. Again, it's this layout process. It's frustrating. It's taking me time, but we're getting closer, a lot closer. So it'll be out soon.
Fantastic. I'm really excited about it. I cannot wait to have a copy and read it.
I think it'll help. I mean, it'll help orange pill normies. That's what it's aimed at. That's the goal.
Is America really broken?
I think it really is. And I don't think it's just America, but I came at it from an America-centric point of view because I'm an American and I'm writing, trying to sell it in America. I hope the book sells worldwide. But sadly, I think it is. I mean, I think that, and I can say that with the benefit of experience and having lived here a long time and being a teenager in kind of the 60s and 70s and early 80s. And so, it's not the country that I grew up in, and things are a lot worse. And I mean, in some ways, they're much better because of all the technology that we have now that we didn't have then. So that's the good news. But the bad news is that there have been a lot of things that have gone in the wrong direction. And of course, I attribute those to the broken money. But it really is broken. I mean, the wealth inequality is really stark. I mean, 1%, the top 1% of the country controls 92% of the wealth. The bottom 50% of the country controls like 4% of the wealth. I mean, it's ridiculous how skewed the wealth is and how unfair that is. Inflation has just devastated everybody, and it's continual and getting worse. We just stumble from one bout of inflation to the next, which, for the people at the top who know how to own assets and lever things up and play the game, it actually can make them richer. But for the people who are working people and working, for a salary, they suffer because their wages never go up as quickly as inflation. And so they're always losing purchasing power. And, the cost, and we all see that. It's tragic, the cost of groceries, et cetera. And then, of course, the political system is horribly broken here. And I don't know, it is in other places too. But, you've just got these warring sides and there's the Blues hate the Reds and the Reds hate the Blues. And, and kind of everybody hates DC. I mean, one of the things I point out in the book is that 80% of the population wants term limits, and yet they're never even talked about, and so you've got these old senators and Congress people who, just should move on, but haven't. And they've got, they're protecting the old way and the old policies, and it hurts everybody. And, when you got a representative democracy where, 80% of the people want something and it can't even be discussed, I mean, that's my definition of being politically broken. So yeah, sadly, I think it is broken, but, it wasn't always this way. I mean, in the book, I talk about this. I mean, if you kind of, the golden age of America, what I call peak America was, and there were a lot of peaks all along the way, but 1946 was peak America, right? We had helped to win World War II, with the Russians. And, we were, in my view, an honest and ethical country in a lot of ways. We're not perfect. There are a lot of bad things we've done, but, I think the world admired us. And I think that, the system was pretty fair, all things considered. And we started slipping after that. And that slippage has only gotten worse. It's like a plane being off course. The further you fly, the more off course you get. So yeah, that's how I'd answer that question.
Inflation is kind of invisible. Like the purchasing power diminishes because if you have $1,000, it's the same $1,000 in 5 years, but the amount of things or items you buy is significantly less.
It's really amazing. I mean, the dollar, since we went off the gold standard, the dollar's lost 98% of its purchasing power. I mean, When I was a kid, gasoline was 25 cents. I mean, and it's not just, I mean, sadly too, it's not just the stated inflation, because they lie about the inflation numbers. I mean, this is back to how broken it is. There's just so many lies being told. And thank God for the internet, and thank God for, podcasters and independent media who are now pointing out these lies. And the book actually has a very hopeful section in it about why we're going to be saved. I mean, the technology, in the form of the internet breaking down the power structure that exists, and in the form of the internet allowing Bitcoin to be a sounder form of money. Those two things are going to fix all these problems. But we're in the middle of the turbulent period where we're going from broken to fixed, and that's, there's going to be a lot of turbulence, right? I mean, we're already in it. I mean, we've already seen it, right? I mean, they printed 40% of the money supply in 2 years in the COVID example. I mean, that's just nuts. I mean, it's like wiping, it's like wiping out 40% of everybody's work, in 2 years. Just say, we're just going to steal this from you. You worked all this time to save this money. Guess what? It's worth 60 cents on the dollar. That's crazy, and sad too. They're hitting you from every single angle. I mean, and in the book, there's some talk about this. There's a group in the U.S. called Shadow Government Statistics, which keeps the inflation numbers. There's something called the Boskin Commission, which back in the 80s they used to restate the inflation numbers, and it was really a trick played on the rest of us to make them look artificially lower than they really are. And the book talks about this, but they used all these mechanisms to cook the inflation numbers. And I mean, they tell us it's 2 or 3% now, or 3% going towards 2, and that's not what that's not what most people are experiencing. Go to the grocery store. My auto insurance last year was up 30%. Look at my home insurance, was up 100%. So, look at healthcare. It's nuts. I mean, it's much worse than they say. But again, there is a hopeful solution here. It's coming, and that's why I do what I do, which is to try to push to make the solution come sooner, because so many people are hurting with the way it currently exists.
When they do the CPI index, I call it CPI index because
Right. There's an example in the book which shows the price of cars went up like 300% actual, but in the time frame they were measuring it, and they said they only went up 70% because they're better cars. They now have analog brakes. So, well, it's still the car you got to buy if you're buying a new car. And, a hedonic adjustment doesn't take away the sticker shock. So, yeah, there's a lot of bad things about the whole inflation racket that, that they talk about. And more recently, they've been talking about Jason Furman and Paul Krugman were saying, well, we should raise the inflation targets. Part of the problem is it's too low. Keep the economy going. 2% is not the right target. I mean, the Fed is supposed to have a goal of price stability, which in theory means zero inflation. But they've somehow interpreted that to mean 2% inflation. Of course, they're higher than that. And now they're talking about maybe we need to have it be even higher. And this is all part of the broken Keynesian model that the book kind of unmasks and hammers away at. I mean, I wrote the book because I feel like America is living in a mass delusion of financial stupidity. And so, and I got so mad at listening to it. I thought, somebody's got to just sit down and call it and say, bull, this is what they're telling you, but this isn't the truth. And here's one man's version of the truth. I mean, you can agree with it or disagree with it, but I certainly present an alternative narrative to what the mainstream is trying to say is the narrative.
Yeah, we are so lucky to have you, by the way. Thank you again for pulling out the big print.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta read it first and see what you all think of it. But it's the best I could do, and hopefully, I think it'll be a good tool for helping your normie friends to understand why and what Bitcoin is. I mean, I think, and I wrote it for that reason. I mean, there's some excellent Bitcoin books, better than mine, really. Safe's book has changed the world and probably the best, economics book of the last 100 years. And I borrow heavily from that and credit him heavily in the book. Lynn Alden's book on broken money is just a beautiful textbook of the history of monetary systems. But the thing with both of those books is they're fairly thick sledding for kind of your average person who's not into economics. And so I tried to spice this one up with my more personal approach and personal anecdotes, and just making it more chatty and perhaps even a little easier to understand. Because what I really want to do is I want that person who doesn't think about money or economics or any of this stuff, just an average person, a worker who, goes to work every day and tries to make money, support their family. They never thought about this issue, to be able to read this and say, hey, you know what, this guy's right. They're screwing us, and here's how, and here's why, and by the way, here's the best part. There's something I can do about it. I can become a Bitcoiner and fight back. And so and I thought there might be a place in the market for a book that did it in that style. So that's why I wrote it.
Absolutely. You can opt out and opt in into Bitcoin. And how do you think Bitcoin is going to help us living this mess?
History shows that when monetary systems break, the way you get the economy or the society back on track is you return to sound money. And so, the problem is, our money is very unsound and getting more unsound as we go, day by day. We were in a really unsound money system. It's getting worse. So, it's pretty simple. When something's broken, that's what you got to fix. You've got to have sound money. Pre-Bitcoin, that choice to do that would have been to go back to a gold standard. And who knows, there might be a time when the authorities try that because it's more tried and true. And, some people are afraid of Bitcoin, although I'm encouraged by what I see Trump and, a lot of Americans thinking that maybe we can just skip the whole gold step and go straight to Bitcoin. But, the two forms of sound money that exist in the world are gold and Bitcoin. I call gold analog sound money. Bitcoin is digital sound money. And, we need to go back to that. And once we get back to a sound money standard, things will be pretty good. In fact, very quickly, I think. But, the transition from here to there is going to be bumpy, and, it's not at all clear how it's going to unfold. And I talk about that in the book. I have a lot of scenarios. I have a policy response section. I have, I kind of map out the various places that we could go here, because none of us really know with certainty what's going to happen. But I'm pretty sure, pretty high probability that given how broken the old thing is, human beings, generally speaking, trend in the right direction towards improvement. So I think we'll ultimately fix this thing and be back on a sound money standard. But it's, it takes time. It's not just tomorrow.
Where do you think banks are going to be in all these new reorganized?
Very interesting question. Yeah, I think, first of all, I think they'll probably end up embracing Bitcoin, or they'll get left behind. Second of all, fractional reserve lending, I talk about that a lot in the book, and how that creates money, and how that's what really the core source of the problem, that these guys get way out over their skis, and then they go bankrupt, and then they get bailed out, and then we print money to bail them out, and that's what fuels the inflation. It's a vicious cycle. I think the banks will be restrained. I think that if we really do return to a sound money standard, banks won't be able to lever themselves up. And in fact, in the book, I call for abolishing the Federal Reserve and abolishing FDIC, and basically having no backstop on the banks, so that a bank would have to behave in a responsible manner. And if they didn't, they'd go bankrupt. And if they went bankrupt, all the depositors in that bank would lose. And so there'd be a real incentive, for them to behave well, as opposed to the incentives that we now have, which create a lot of what we call moral hazard, where they just say, hey, who cares? I can be, like they did in 08, I can be extremely aggressive, make as much money as possible. When the whole thing blows up, they'll just bail me out. That therein lies the problem, right? That bailout costs everyone else money, because they print that money to bail them out. They get saved, and we all pay more for gasoline and food. It's just that simple, right?
I agree with you. It's not going to be a straight line. It's going to be bumpy for sure.
Yeah.
But do you think we will move towards market cap of gold? We are now hovering about 10%, more or less. It's going to be in cycles. Like, are you expecting us to climb up and then correct and climb up again following the 4-year cycle? Or do you think it's going to be some sort of event which is going to take us into the so-called super cycle?
There's no question that Bitcoin is superior to gold in every respect. And I believe Bitcoin is digital gold, and we live in a digital world. I think Bitcoin will replace gold fully. However, not tomorrow. 8 billion people know that, gold is sound money. A few hundred million, maybe, at a large number, I'd say probably even less than that, really understand that Bitcoin is sound money. And so, it's done a pretty nice job. It's $2 trillion of market cap. Gold is closer to 18, as you say, although not all of the gold's tradable. You kind of consider the central bank gold, the antiquities gold, the gold that's on women's necks in the form of jewelry. Of course, that could be tradable. You could melt down your gold necklace, but the tradable gold is more like 4 to 5 trillion. But I think as money shifts out of other assets, both Bitcoin and gold can win, and I think both of them are going to go up in price. Just Bitcoin a lot faster, And because Bitcoin's got they both benefit from monetary debasement, but Bitcoin's got an adoption curve going on too. And so, Jesse Meyer on Twitter has a great chart that shows $900 trillion of financial assets, with real estate being half of that and the balance being stocks and bonds and gold and cash. And, we're at 2 trillion. So it's 2/10 of 1% is currently Bitcoin. So we got a long way to go. I mean, Bitcoin could do a 10 bagger from here, which would imply that we'd be at $1 million a coin, and we'd still only be 2% of total global assets. So this is the soundest form of money ever invented. So I think Bitcoin is going to do a 10 bagger, and I think it's going to do a 10 bagger again. But on what time frame, I don't really know. I mean, I use this kind of a lower end base case, the power law model, because it's got a lot of correlation looking backwards. And I think that shows you at 1 million in 5-6 years. But I think you probably get there faster than that. We're at that stage now, kind of the tipping point. I mean, the ETFs were a huge thing, right? And now we've got a president and administration that's crypto friendly and Bitcoin friendly. Things I heard when I was at MENA, you were there too, are that the strategic reserve is something they're going to do. We now know, I also heard at MENA that other nation states, including the UAE, Oman, and the Saudis are all stacking Bitcoin. So it's a coming thing, and it might surprise us. We just don't know. We just really don't know. But in my mind, it's going to be digital gold and then some. And I think both gold and Bitcoin are going to go up a lot in nominal, fiat money terms, because we printed a lot of fiat money, and they're going to have to print more.
The administration
Right.
is pro Bitcoin and crypto, I'll have to say. I mean, seeing Trump launching meme coins wasn't actually nothing I expected. But
Yeah, I wasn't too happy about that. I don't, I don't know what he was thinking there. I mean, I'll give him a pass, but I was disappointed to see him do that. On balance, this is a crypto-friendly administration, though, and that's a huge positive. I mean, Operation Choke Point, will get shut down. Banks will be able to do it. SAB 121, will not get through, and so the banks will now be able to custody and deal in Bitcoin. I mean, this is a big deal. You'll be able to borrow against your Bitcoin. I mean, there are a lot of good things coming that I think are going to be enormously positive. I mean, as I said, nation states. I mean, El Salvador continues to stack, and I think there are a lot of nation states behind the scenes that are stacking, Bitcoin. So, I mean, to me, I remember Saylor saying recently, we're kind of in that golden age, gold rush of Bitcoin, the 10 years where it just does the most, the fastest. And that's kind of how it feels to me. Like we're right at that cusp of really, putting up some numbers that people are like, oh my God, look at this. I mean, we're not going to stop at 100. We're going to go to 200 and then 300. And, I mean, and people are going to be like, whoa, and some will continue to say it's a bubble, but it's not. It's the real deal. Having said that, there'll be volatility. I mean, you mentioned, I mean, because of the way the cycles work, because of the halving, because just people tend to get out too far over their skis, and then of course FUD sets in, and some people sell. I could easily see us in the cycle go to 300 or 400 and then correct back to 250 or something. I mean, it's that I think the volatility will be there for a while. That's not going to go away. It's going to be less. I mean, I think the biggest drawdown was like 90% in the beginning. We're never going to see one of those again. You're not going to get to buy Bitcoin 90% lower than it is today. You might get to buy it 50% lower than it is at the peak that we're heading towards. That seems possible.
the ETF, like you pointed out, I mean, Bitcoin smashed all the record. I think we've done 50 billion in 212 days or something
Oh,
like
it's
this.
unbelievable. I mean, the gold ETF did very well, by the way, when it was launched in the early 2000s. It did extremely well, grew very rapidly, and it helped fuel the gold price from 250 to $1,900 an ounce. It was a big deal. But this has done. I mean, it's blown it away. I mean, much more quickly.
There is a positive signal from the administration, right? Which means if you are someone on the fence of maybe thinking of investing, well, now you have no blockers and it's been legitimized. So
Exactly. I can't tell you how many friends I had who said, "Well, yeah, that's all nice. I get your theory, but the government's going to shut that down." Well, I mean, I honestly, I was kind of scared that we wouldn't get an ETF. I thought, they're going to figure out ways to stop that, but they didn't. And I mean, the ETFs are huge. They're really, really big. You
Do you
know.
think are we going to see an in-kind soon coming in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there are a lot of things you'd love to have in in-kind ETF. You'd love to have, no capital gains tax on Bitcoin. I mean, Trump kind of floated that in one of his conversations. Um, I don't know. I think those might be dreams that are a little bit too far. I mean, I think I think they're very doable further out as Bitcoin becomes more part of the infrastructure and ecosystem. Everyone will kind of want that, and so the government will have to bend to it. But I just don't know. I don't. I mean, even the strategic reserve. I think what they're going to do, Bitcoin strategic reserve. I think they're going to do it as an executive order. I mean, if you consider that, basically Nixon and Roosevelt, they didn't go through Congress to do what they did monetarily. I mean, Roosevelt grabbed gold and then revalued. Nixon broke the chain to gold at 71 and devalued, and they just did it on their own. So I think that Trump will probably do an EO where he says we're buying Bitcoin. Now, the question is how much and from what source, and the exchange stabilization fund's not huge, and it's used for other things, but they could use it to do this. I mean, I love the Loomis bill that says they're going to buy 1 million coins over a period of time. I've heard mixed debates on that. I've heard some people say, "Oh yeah, it's no problem. She's got the votes; they'll get it through." I've heard others say, "There's no way." So, so I don't know. I mean, that'd be really great, but I'm not counting on that. But you don't really need any of that. I mean, because we're going in the right direction, and I think the surprises. My sense is the surprises will be positive surprises because we are going in the right direction, and I mean, I compare it to gold this year. I just did my quarterly year-end report, and yeah, Bitcoin was up 121% last year. I mean, gold had a good year. Gold was up like 27, 28%. It's a very good year, but Bitcoin was up 121%. I mean, it's just, and I don't see what's going to stop it. I just don't. I see more adoption. I see more, more use cases developing all the time. So, betting against it to me just seems crazy. And to not have some, I try to tell all my clients, you don't have to go crazy on this thing. I mean, it's got a lot of upside. You can only lose 1x what you put in it. I think you can make 10x or 100x if you wait long enough. And so you need to have some, because if you don't buy it and it goes up 100x, you're going to have regret, even if it was only, 10,000. I mean, 10,000 times 100 is a big number. So, and although Bitcoin doesn't pay a yield for older people like myself, I mean, what I can envision happening if I were to stop working at some point, and I probably will, I would just sell 1% a year and use that as my living expenses. And, I don't know, what have I got, 30 years left? I mean, the balance that I didn't sell would go up in value. So every year I'd have to sell a smaller percent, right? Unless my living costs went up a lot. So, it provides you with a sense of comfort that you're never going to run out of money, which is a really fabulous thing, because I watched my dad, and I've watched most retired people kind of go through this, where, you can retire with a nice sum of money. It's your life's work, it's your savings, but you don't know how long you're going to live, and your expenses are going to increase, and it might get to the point where, geez, I'm going to run out of money. I'm going to have to really curtail my lifestyle because I haven't saved enough. And this is kind of the other side of that problem, where it goes up so much that you're unlikely to run out of money.
Exactly. And by the way, it's all an illusion, like you said in the beginning, right? Because whatever you have in the bank is not in the bank, it's not money, it's not yours. So we go back
Well,
to the
there's that too.
back to the same
Yeah,
problem, right?
create positive cash flow and save it. I mean, that's the trick. That's how everybody who's ever gotten rich has gotten rich, is by having savings and allowing them to compound over time. They save in assets or a form of money that they know will grow in value. And then they let the beauty of compounding work for them. I mean, it's amazing. I think most young people, unless they've really sat down with a calculator and played with it, they don't understand just how powerful compounding is. If you just save 10% of your income, I mean, there are all these stories of people lived very modest lives, never really made big money, but managed to save 10% of their money, or sometimes more, and put it into things that went up in value, not down in value. And by the time they were in their 50s or 60s or 70s, it was kind of stunning how rich they were. So, it does work, but it requires a certain amount of discipline, and it requires putting, the key piece is it requires never losing the money, putting it into things that hold their value or go up in value, year after year.
This is the real proof of work, right? You put in the
Yeah,
work into this. Right.
Yeah. Well, investing is proof of work, and it requires patience, and it requires a long time preference. I mean, most people, anyone who's been in Bitcoin for 7 or 8 years understands this. I mean, it's no fun. I mean, the Sam Bankman-Fried episode was a good case. I mean, I'm sure every Bitcoiner took their stack and multiplied times 70,000, and then SBF blew up, and Powell started tightening, and suddenly we went from 70 to 15, and that's no fun. I mean, on the other hand, the way I viewed it is, well, I'm not worried about it because I know it'll be higher than 70 someday. And oh my goodness, look at this 15. Jesus, this is really cheap. What else can I sell? Gold, silver, some of the other stuff I have in order to buy some at 15. So, yeah, I mean, but I know, I mean, I try to counsel people. I mean, the one way people do get hurt on this is they chase price near the end of an upswing, and then it corrects, and they think they made a mistake, and they're not willing to live through the correction. They're not willing to hodl. And I know some people who did that, and that's sad because if they just hodl, it's I love Sailor's, the quote from Sailor where he just says, "It's going up forever, Laura." I just think that's such a great quote because it really is. I mean, if once you fully understand what it is, then you really can get behind that idea, and you can realize that, I mean, look, Max thought he paid too much because Trace paid 25 cents and Max paid $1. Well, I thought I paid too much. My first coins were at 300 or 400, and Max paid $1. And I've got friends who I've talked into doing it. And then they look at it and they say, Jesus, you got some at 10 and 20 and 15, and how can I pay 100? And I'm like, well, you shouldn't be thinking of it in those terms. What you should be thinking of it is, if it's at $1 million in 5 years and it's at 10 million in 10 years, are you going to regret that you didn't buy some today at 100? Because that's kind of the path that I think it's on. And but you have to understand what it is. I mean, a lot of people don't really understand how unique this thing is. The notion of true immutable digital scarcity is a breakthrough technological notion. It's never existed before. Every form of money, including gold, that's been around in human existence has been dilutable. That is, they could make more of it so that each unit was worth less. And in the case of gold, that happens at 1.7% a year. The supply grows. And, in the case of Bitcoin right now, it's 0.8, and every 4 years it gets cut in half. So, it doesn't matter where the price goes. That supply curve is not changing. And that's the part I think so many normies or traditional investors, they just miss that. They don't really understand. Hang on a second. You mean this is, and it's really different. There's a part in the book where I talk about how, I missed the network game, Metcalfe's law on the networks. I was a traditional investor in venture capital. I was looking at growing companies and looked at multiples of cash flow and earnings, all the normal stuff. And what I kind of missed, because I looked at these companies in the 2008 to 2020 area, even a little earlier, 2000 to 2020 area, I missed the value of networking companies and how quickly they could grow. Amazon's up 218,000%. Google's up 9,000%. Microsoft's up 7,000%. Facebook's up like 3,000% from their IPO. And so this is a time from the early 2000s to 20 years later. We've got these networking businesses that went up literally thousands of times your money. Pre the internet and pre-networking, I don't think that ever existed. I mean, I don't think, I'm sure General Motors went up a lot from 1920 to 1960. But I don't think it went up thousands of percent in terms of market value. Maybe it did, but even so, that's over a 40-year period. I mean, this is over a 20-year period. You've got networking businesses that have increased in value. So it's kind of like it broke the traditional Graham and Dodd investing model. And so, because of that, I think that now what people need to do is, there's investing in general regular businesses, and that has one set of rules and models and cash flow multiples, all that stuff. Then there's another thing which is called investing in a growing network, totally different model, where you can pay a lot more than you think you can pay because as Metcalfe's law says, the value is growing at the square of the number of users. So as long as the number of users is growing, you're getting a multiplier effect on the growth of the value. So that's something that I think a lot of people are missing. And again, I lay all this out in the book. I try to explain wake up. It's like, hello, wake up, guys. This is, that you're missing this. I mean, and 20 years from now, people who own Bitcoin are going to be in a very, very different financial situation than people who did not. Very different. And, and the people who did not are going to be salty about it, or going to say it's unfair, or they're going to be angry, they're going to be frustrated, or whatever. I want to try and prevent as many people as possible from being in that condition. I want them to read this book, think it through just at a logical level, and go, you know what, he's right. And I'm not going to take all of my money and put it in Bitcoin. It's too risky. It's too volatile for me. But I'm going to take some of my money and put it in Bitcoin because I don't want to miss that ride. And it could have a really big impact on their outcome or their future, financial condition.
It's interesting when I talk to normal people, they have less exposure into the asset. They maybe don't study, they haven't done research properly, whatever. They come up with some random things like, oh, but what if there's going to be a new Bitcoin coming out? Something better than Bitcoin.
Yeah, we've all heard all of these. Or what if the quantum one that some of the smart people are now using is quantum computing. From what I've been able to determine in a deep dive with all the people who've looked at that, is that it's just not a threat for quite some time. And if it is a threat at some point in time, I would imagine what would happen is that it would get integrated into the algorithm, and there'd be a hard fork, and everyone would move over onto the new chain. It's quantum computing proof, so to speak. So I just don't worry about that one. Really, there aren't many things I do worry about with respect to Bitcoin. I mean, I think that I kind of think it's inevitable. I mean, I guess my biggest thing is, you're a lot younger than I am. My biggest thing is, I'm like, okay, let's speed this up. I want to be around to see, the outcome of, a full Bitcoin standard and a world running on Bitcoin. I want to, because I think that's going to look really great, and it's going to feel really great, much better than the world we live in right now. So, and I'd like to, I think it's going to happen, certainly within 30 years, hopefully sooner than that, hopefully, 20 or 10 or 15. I mean, so we'll see.
Do you think El Salvador is kind of printing that template for us to watch?
I think it's great. Yeah, no, I have I applaud them on what they're doing. I applaud Max and Stacy for what they're doing there. I think they are creating the template. I think it will have an enormous impact on that country. But to be fair, it's a small country, and they've got a long way to go. I mean, they're coming from a much less developed background. I mean, um, it will be much more impactful when the big countries all start to FOMO into it, and it just, it's, in my view, it's going to become obvious to everybody in the next, I'd say, 10 years, maybe 15 years. It's going to become obvious to everybody that this is the best form of money we've ever had, and the switch over into this is going to be really, really substantial. And that's how you get to $1, 2, 3, $4 million a coin. And at that point in time, all the other stuff will just, it'll quickly fade away. So that's where we're going, but it's going to take some time. It's at least 5 years, and maybe 10, 15. I mean, the only thing I would say is that I think there's some possibility that there's a layer two that develops over time, that's not necessarily Lightning. I mean, I have to say, as I look at Bitcoin today, the one area that I'm slightly disappointed in is the development of the Lightning Network. I think it's been, too slow and tough, and I'd like to see it come along quicker. I mean, it's digital gold. We've got a great store of value currency now, but we need, the medium of exchange currency. It could be something else. I don't know. I mean, there could be a very quick way to swap from Bitcoin to something else. I mean, as we all know, the transaction costs are too high to buy coffee with Bitcoin on the main chain, and that's only going to get worse because, as Bob Burnett points out, I mean, there are two things about Bitcoin that are limited. One is the total supply of 21 million coins. The other thing that's limited in supply are the number of blocks and the block size. I mean, and I think we fought the block size war. I don't think they'll change it again. I think everybody believes in maintaining the system we have now. But that means that we can only have X number of transactions per year, and the world needs a lot more transactions than that. So we need a level two that helps address that issue. But there are a lot of coins competing to be that level two, and Lightning is competing to be that level two, and I'm quite sure that level two will emerge. I mean, this reminds me very much of the internet in the early days. I mean, there were a lot of things wrong with it. It was hard to use, etc. But, solutions just emerged. I mean, people, there's a lot of incentive to create solutions to these problems, and we will, technologies will do it. So.
The first step is to fix the base, define what
Right.
money is, and then you
Exactly.
can build on top of the base. I completely agree.
Exactly. We got a great solid monetary base right here, right now, and all the other stuff's going to come following right along behind it.
And Larry, I have to ask because I follow you extensively on Twitter. Thank you so much for X. I would never get around it.
I wish he hadn't changed the name. I think it's Twitter, but whatever.
And I've seen that you daily post the workout of the day for CrossFit. I have to ask, I mean, how have you got into it?
That's a great question. So it was probably over 10 years ago now, when I was kind of, and this is, I tell this story in the book as well, but I was kind of suffering in the gold trade, and a lot of things in my life were really stressful and hard. And I came out of the 2008 experience, and I had pivoted into gold and silver because I thought QE and ZERP were really crimes that were going to badly debase the currency, and I was right. But and so it worked quite well for a few years, and then they managed to engineer another credit bubble and a decline in the gold price. And so from 11 to 15, I got hit in the face repeatedly. And I was kind of tired of getting hit in the face. I thought I was long-term right, but I was short-term wrong. And it occurred to me I hadn't post high school, college, etc. I hadn't stayed in very good shape physically. I'd gained weight and didn't exercise very often, and so on. And I thought, I want to be around to win in this game, and so that means I got to have longevity. And I read a book called Younger Next Year by Chris Crowley, or Henry Crowley, I think it is, and it talked about, and I was in my 50s, so it talked about how exercise was the key to living to be 70, 80, 90, and be strong, not be decrepit in your later years. And so he had a bunch of things in there about how to do it. And one of the things that I then at the same time I learned about this new system called CrossFit, which is something invented by a guy named Greg Glassman, a very repeatable mechanical system for for developing fitness. It was being used by Navy SEALs and a lot of folks, and it was said to be a great program if you could stand it, because sometimes it's very painful to do these workouts. It would get you in really good shape quickly. And so I found a CrossFit gym near where I lived. I walked in. I said, "Hey, I'm fat and out of shape. Can this work for me?" And they're like, "Yeah, it'll definitely work for you. All you got to do is keep walking through the door." And they were really good because they didn't advance me too fast. I mean, they scaled everything in the beginning. They walked me up a curve. I mean, I was really out of shape. I couldn't do some of the first workouts. I scaled them down, and they were easier than they should have been. But over time, I got stronger and healthier and fitter, and so I could do them. And I've been doing it, I think, 11 or 12 years now. Not, very consistently. Although there are weeks I go 5 days, there are weeks I go 3 days. I do other stuff. I swim. I ride a bike. I walk. And there's some days I only lift weights. But just kind of mix it up. But the whole game here for me, I did it because I wanted to be around to see the central bankers fail.
I love
Central
it.
the book kind of has this theme. You'll see, I'm no fan of central bankers. They've caused me and my family a lot of pain over the years. And I think, the broken monetary system is really, it lays at their feet. And so, I wanted to be around to see the end game where they lose and I win. And I guess because that means having a long-term preference. That means being willing to play the long game. So CrossFit is kind of physical proof of work, where if you keep yourself healthy, you got a good shot at making it into your 90s. And so that's kind of why I'm doing it, because I want to be around to see the bright future that being on Bitcoin is going to bring.
I love it. By the way, tomorrow morning I'm going to jump into the first CrossFit gym. I'll let you know on Twitter how
Well,
it goes.
that's great. I think you'll really enjoy it. All I would say to you is just, go slow, and, don't, it's supposed to hurt, but you're not supposed to kill yourself. And, just do what you can, and then just keep, like they said to me, just keep walking through the door. It's much more important that you show up. You've got to do it at least 3 days a week. And if you could do 4 or 5, that's great. Rather than trying one day a week and kill yourself. I posted this recently on X. One of my CrossFit coaches says, there's a lot of people, they work out, they go one day on the weekend, they work out like crazy. And he said, look, there's no point in shaving 7 times on Sunday. You got to shave every day. And that's really how it is with fitness and exercise too. Some days I go in there, I don't want to do it. I'm tired. I feel like shit. and I just dragged my ass through the workout, but I did something. And and then other days I go in there, I feel like a monster, and I just want to tear it up. And that's just part of the process. But the fact that you go consistently, I mean, I'll tell you what, if you do this, I promise you, if you do this for 3 months, you won't recognize yourself. You'll be like, holy, I mean, you won't recognize yourself, your energy level, your strength, how you look in a bathing suit, all of it. You'll just be like, wow. I mean, I'm not the same person I was 3 months ago. So I highly recommend it to people. I really do. It's a great program. Please keep me in on the loop. I love to see it. I mean, anyone who's done, it will change your life. It'll be the most positive thing you've done in your life in a long, long time. It will change your life. I mean, I'm 67. I'm in better shape than I was when I was 35. I mean, not in every respect. I can't run as fast and stuff, but I mean, overall, strength, fitness, how I feel, energy level, I feel better today than I did when I was 20 years younger. And
Fantastic.
I mean, yeah, and in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, this decay going on, but you don't really notice it. I mean, I don't know what your age is, but it gets a lot steeper in your 50s and 60s. So the difference between doing this and not doing it, it becomes meaningful when you're 50 plus years old, right?
Yeah, no, I can tell I'm almost 50, so I can see the 50 coming through
Right.
my way, and I can
Exactly.
I just have to do it,
It'll get to the point where you'll be addicted to it and you won't want to miss it. I mean, everyone has a bad day or two. And there's some days where you're just really beat up and you skip it because you feel so beat up. The mornings I wake up and I'm just like, because usually it's after I do one where I go 100%. I just totally trash myself. I wake up the next morning, I look at my work thing and I'm like, my recovery is like 9%. I'm like, man, I got to take a day off. All you're trying to do is be the best version of you. Nobody cares who's winning. Nobody cares who's fastest. Nobody cares who's strongest. What everybody cares about is, are you showing up and doing something? And so it becomes you get a very big positive feedback loop going where you want to show up because you're going to see your friends. They're going to high five you, and I mean, like Bitcoiners, how Bitcoiners are really positive about the world. We know we can fix the world. We know shit's going to get better. We know we've got the right solution. It's kind of the same thing, except it just is respect to fitness. And it tends to, I mean, how Bitcoiners are generally type A, pretty driven, I don't know, maybe on the spectrum, I mean, whatever. But I mean, it tends, sometimes cult-like. I mean, all we talk about is Bitcoin. I mean, CrossFit's the same thing. CrossFitters, all they talk about is CrossFit. I mean, you got a lot of obsessive personalities in it. You got a lot of ex-alcoholics, people who, I don't drink anymore. You get a lot of people who don't drink in it, that because, they like drinking, they figured out it wasn't good for them, and then they quit. So it's a certain personality type A personality that, it's fun to be around. It really is.
Fantastic. And Larry, thank you so much, man. You've been an absolute legend to come on and share your time with us.
Really great to be with you. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make you meet me sometime in Italy and show me around.
Done. That's a
Yeah.
done deal.
We'll do some CrossFit wads.
Exactly.
You can show me all the good spots because your home country is like probably my favorite country in the world. So
fantastic. And guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you, Larry, again. It's been a pleasure.
okay, thanks. It was very nice to speak with you. Enjoyed it. Thanks.
Likewise. Cheers.